There is a switch in the world that must never be turned off. It is not a metaphor. It is not a figure of speech. It is a physical, electric reality. For over 40 years, a specific frequency has been broadcasting a signal that does not carry music, news, or weather. It carries a threat. The signal is a short, buzzing tone repeating approximately 25 times per minute, every minute, of every hour, of every day. It buzzed while empires fell. It buzzed while the internet was born. It is buzzing right now. As you listen to this, the terrifying paradox of this sound is not what it says, but what it prevents. Intelligence analysts and military historians call it a dead hand mechanism. The theory is simple, and it is chilling. As long as the buzzing continues, the world remains at peace. But if the buzzing stops, the machines are programmed to wake up, and the machines do not know the meaning of mercy. We are entering the archive. The air here is recycled, cool, and smells of ozone and old paper. The lighting is low awash of cold cyan and clinical green from the server racks that line the walls. We are opening a file that has been gathering dust since the height of the Cold War. This is case file 4625. The subject is a ghost station known to the world as UVB-76, or more colloquially, the buzzer. Most mysteries fade with time. Evidence is lost. Witnesses pass away. Interest wanes. The mystery of the buzzer is different because it is not fading. It is evolving. It is a relic of a fallen superpower that refuses to die. To understand the gravity of this signal, we must first understand the silence that surrounds it. Imagine a swamp, dense with fog, located at coordinates 60 degrees, 18 minutes north. The location is Povorovo, Russia, a short distance from Moscow. For decades, locals knew not to approach the fenced-off compound deep in the woods. There were no grand signs, only the rusted geometry of massive radio antennas cutting through the tree line, and a concrete bunker that seemed to breathe a low-frequency hum into the damp earth. From this location, a transmitter punched a hole through the ionosphere. This was not a standard broadcast. It was a monolith of sound. If you were an amateur radio operator in London, or New York, or Tokyo, and you tuned your shortwave receiver to the frequency 4625 kHz, you would hear it. A sharp, metallic buzz. Then a pause. Then a buzz. It sounds like a foghorn dragging itself across a concrete floor. It sounds like a dying synthesizer. But to the intelligence agencies of the West, the CIA MI6, the NSA 8 sounded like a heartbeat. Why would a nation spend millions of rubles, year after year, to broadcast a monotonous noise? This is where the file gets colder. This is where the paranoia sets in. In the world of high-stakes espionage, nothing is done without a purpose. A radio signal requires massive amounts of electricity. It requires maintenance crews, engineers, guards, and constant fuel for backup generators. You do not maintain a facility like that for a prank. You do not maintain it for nostalgia. You maintain it because the signal is performing a function that is vital to national survival. The prevailing theory, supported by fragmented documents recovered after the dissolution of the Soviet Union, suggests that UVB-76 is part of the perimeter system. In the West, we know it as the dead hand. The logic of the Cold War was built on mutually assured destruction. If Side A launches a nuclear weapon, Side B must launch their own before they are destroyed. But what if the attack is so fast, so devastating, that the leadership of Side B is eliminated before they can give the order? What if the president, the generals, and the command centers are vaporized in the first strike? Who gives the order then? The answer is the system. The dead hand was designed to solve the problem of human mortality. If the sensors detected a nuclear impact, seismic shockwaves, radiation spikes, or a sudden loss of communication with military command, the system would check for the heartbeat. It would listen for the signal on 4625 kHz. If the signal was there, the system would stand down, knowing the command structure was still intact. But if the signal was gone, if the buzzer had stopped, the system would assume that Moscow was gone. It would assume that the humans were dead, and it would automatically, without a single human hand turning a key, launch the entire nuclear arsenal at predetermined targets. This turns the annoying, buzzing sound into the most important lullaby in human history. We are listening to the sound of a beast being kept asleep, but the file contains anomalies. If this was simply an automated machine, the signal would be perfect. It would be a digitally generated wave, crisp and unchanging. But UVB-76 is not digital. It is aggressively, disturbingly, analog. Analysis of the audio spectrum reveals background noises. If you listen closely to the recording archives from the early 2000s, behind the buzzing, you can hear the faint, ghostly artifacts of a room. You can hear the shuffling of feet. You can hear the distant slamming of a heavy door. You can hear the muffled echo of a telephone ringing in an empty hall. This implies something far more unsettling than a computer program. It implies that the buzzing is not being generated by the transmitter. It implies that the buzzing is being played into a microphone, a live microphone, open 24 hours a day, for 40 years. Think about the logistical madness of that. It means that somewhere, in a cold, concrete bunker, a microphone has been sitting on a table, or mounted to a wall, recording a buzzing device it means that the silence of that room is being broadcast to the entire world. It means that when the wind blows against the bunker walls, the world hears it. It means that if a soldier on guard duty coughs near the open mic, the spies in Washington hear it. And they have heard it. The archive logs listing the voice breakdowns of UVB-76 are some of the most eerie documents in modern radio history. The buzzer is not always a buzz. Sometimes, the machine breaks. Sometimes the mask slips. On extremely rare occasions, maybe once every few years, the buzzing stops. The airwaves go silent, the heartbeat. In those moments, thousands of listeners around the world hold their breath. They watch the spectral analyzers on their computer screens, waiting for the spike that signals the end of the world. Usually, the silence lasts only a moment. A backup generator kicks in. The buzz returns. The crisis is averted. But sometimes, in that gap of silence, a voice breaks through. We have a transcript from December 24, 1997. The buzz stopped. The static rose, and then, a harsh, distorted Russian voice spoke into the void. It did not sound like a computer. It sounded like a man who was cold, tired, and reading a code that meant nothing to him, but everything to someone else. The voice said, Jao BB Setendai Se, Ya UVB 76, 18008, Bramel 742799914, Boris, Roman, Olga Mikhail, Anna Larisa, 742799914. Then, a click, and the buzzing returned. What was who are Boris, Roman, and Olga? These are not just names. In the phonetic alphabet of the Russian military, they represent letters. They are coordinates. They are instructions. They are orders being sent to agents who have been waiting in the cold for decades. These are monoliths, messages that activate sleeper cells, or update the targeting parameters of the automated silos. The chilling realization is that we are not listening to a dead system. We are listening to a dormant one. The lights are still on in the bunker. The microphone is still listening, and the codes are still being read. The mystery deepened in the summer of 2010. For nearly 30 years, the signal had remained Poverovo, broadcasting from that rusted antenna in the swamp. But in August of that year, the heartbeat began to falter. This was not the usual maintenance pause. This was a seizure. The buzzing became erratic. The tone shifted in pitch, sounding deeper, almost sick. Then, a series of frantic, distorted voice messages were transmitted. They were not the standard coded numbers. They were hurried. They sounded like panic. And then, the station went silent. For hours, the frequency 4625 kHz was nothing but the wash of natural atmospheric static. To the casual listener, it was just silence. To the analysts monitoring the dead hand protocols, it was the most dangerous silence since the Cuban Missile Crisis. Did the silence mean the system had failed, or did it mean the system had been triggered? We now know, from declassified reports and the brave urban explorers who later infiltrated the abandoned site, that 2010 was not the end of the buzzer. It was a migration. The Russian military was moving the heart of the beast. Imagine the scene at the Poverovo bunker during those weeks. It was a frantic evacuation. Soldiers stripping copper wire from the walls, officers burning documents in steel drums in the courtyard. They were abandoning the shell, but they had to keep the ghost alive. As the transmitter in Poverovo was powered down for the final time, a new transmitter, hundreds of miles away in the Leningrad military district, roared to life. The transition was clumsy, but effective. The heartbeat skipped a beat, but it did not stop. When urban explorers finally cut through the rusted fence of the old Poverovo site years later, they found a time capsule of Cold War paranoia. The bunker was flooded with ice-cold dark water. The floors were strewn with logbooks, actual daily logs recording the signal status. One logbook, left rotting on a damp desk, simply read, "Generator fuel low, requesting resupply." It was a mundane administrative note for a machine capable of ending civilization. The move to the new location, believed to be near the village of Karo Massive, changed the character of the sound. The signal became stronger, cleaner, yet somehow colder. The live mic artifacts became less frequent, suggesting a more modernized, perhaps automated facility. But the core function remained unchanged. The buzzer is still a tripwire. This brings us to the modern era, and the strange relationship between the buzzer and the internet. In the age of cyber warfare, UVB-76 has become a battlefield. It is no longer just a ghost story. It is a target dart in recent years. The frequency has been jammed by pirates. Using high-powered software-defined radios, hackers from across Europe and Asia have attempted to drown out the buzzer. They have played rave music, memes, and synthesized images over the frequency. For a moment, the dreaded Dead Hand channel was playing pop songs, but what happened next is what truly chills the blood. The hackers didn't win. They didn't shut it down. Whenever the jamming became too loud, the buzzer fought back. The power of the signal suddenly spiked, drowning out the interference with a deafening, overpowered roar. This confirms that there is still a human hand on the dial. Someone is watching the monitors. Someone saw the interference, reached out, and turned the volume up. They are still there. They are still guarding the frequency. Why? Why protect an obsolete radio station with such ferocity? Because it is not obsolete. In the world of digital communication, fiber optics can be cut. Satellites can be blinded by lasers or debris. The internet can be severed, but shortwave radio uses the sky itself. It bounces signals off the ionosphere. It is the only communication method that can survive a total infrastructure collapse. When the power grids fail, when the internet goes dark, when the satellites burn up, the buzzer will still be there. It is the ultimate failsafe. It is a reminder that the architecture of our destruction is durable. We built these systems to outlast us. We built them to be patient. The sound you hear, that monotonous, grinding buzz, is the sound of patience. It is the sound of a predator waiting for the prey to make a mistake. As you lie here tonight, in the safety of your room, listening to the quiet hum of the world around you, remember that the signal is active. It is traveling through the night sky at the speed of light. It is passing through your walls. It is vibrating in the air. That the file on UVB-76 remains open. There is no conclusion. There is no declassification date. The story does not end because the signal has not ended. The technicians change shifts. The guards rotate. The fuel trucks arrive at the secret bunker near St. Petersburg to refill the generators. The seasons change from the white snow of Russian winter to the gray mud of spring. And through it all, the microphone listens. And the buzzer sounds. Buzz, pause, buzz. It is a lullaby for the end of the world. And as long as you can hear it, or as long as you know it is there, you are safe. The danger is not in the noise. The danger is in the silence. We close the file on the heartbeat for now. The server lights blink in the dark archive. The cooling fans spin. We place the folder back into the steel drawer, but we do not lock it. We never lock it, because we might need to check it again tomorrow. Sleep well. The system is watching. There are places on this earth where the map intentionally blurs. These are not errors in cartography. They are erasures. If you were to look at a standard Soviet military map from 1980, focusing on the dense forest region 40 kilometers northwest of Moscow, you would see nothing but a sea of green pine and birch trees. You would see a swamp. You would see emptiness. But if you were to overlay that map with high-resolution satellite imagery from the modern era, and zoom into the coordinates 60 degrees, 18 minutes north, 37 degrees, 13 minutes east, the emptiness vanishes. In its place, a geometric scar appears in the forest. It is a perfect square, cut violently into the tree line. Inside that square, ghostly shadows of massive steel towers stretch across the ground. This is not a town. It is not a factory. It is the physical home of the phantom. For decades, the world heard the sound of the buzzer, but this rotting collection of concrete and wire was the throat that screamed it. The file we are opening tonight is stamped with the location identifier. To the locals, it was just the military unit. To the intelligence officers of NATO, it was a high-priority signal source. But to us, tonight, it is a monument to the terrifying durability of the Cold War. The file was stamped never open, yet we begin tonight. We retreat now into the archive. The digital noise of the modern world fades away. The bright screens turn off. We are left with the cool blue glow of the history logs. The air is still. The only movement is the slow rotation of the tape reels recording this session. We are traveling back not in time, but in space to the edge of a Russian swamp where the silence is heavy and the water is dark. To understand the signal, we must walk the perimeter of its origin. Imagine standing at the edge of that forest. The year could be 1982, or it could be today. The atmosphere is the same. The air is thick with moisture. The ground is soft, composed of peat and decaying moss. It is difficult terrain, chosen specifically because it discourages visitors. As you push through the dense wall of birch trees, the first thing you encounter is not the building, but the warning. A fence, rusted now, but once formidable, slices through the woods. The signs are faded yellow triangles with black skulls or lightning bolts. Do not enter high voltage restricted zone. Most people would turn back. But the archive demands that we step through the broken sections of the wire. When the station was active, this perimeter was guarded by men with orders to shoot. There were guard dogs, Caucasian shepherds bred for aggression, patrolling the gaps between the trees. But today, the guards are gone. The dogs are ghosts. What remains is the architecture of paranoia, that as we move deeper into the clearing, the source of the transmission reveals itself. It is not a single tower like a commercial radio station. It is a web. The antenna system at Poverovo was a massive, horizontal dipole array. It looked less like a radio tower, and more like a copper ceiling suspended over the forest. Thick cables were strung between metal masts, creating a grid that hovered above the earth. This design was intentional. It was built to fire radio waves straight up, vertically, slamming them into the ionosphere so they would rain down over the entire northern hemisphere. It was a design meant to ensure that no matter where a Soviet agent was hiding in a basement in Berlin or a submarine in the Atlantic, they would hear the buzz. The scale of the copper wiring here was immense. Urban explorers who infiltrated the site in the early 2010s reported that the ground was literally woven with metal. Grounding wires ran deep into the wet swamp soil to improve conductivity. The entire forest floor was part of the machine. When you walked here, you were walking on the circuit board of a doomsday device. Let us approach the main bunker. It is a two-story building, constructed of gray silicate brick, typical of late Soviet military architecture. It is ugly, functional, and imposing. The windows are narrow, like the slits of a fortress. Today, those windows are shattered, staring out like empty eye sockets. But inside is where the story turns from history to mystery. When the Russian military abandoned this site in 2010 to move the transmitter to St. Petersburg, they left in a hurry. The archive photos from the first explorers show a scene of chaotic departure. It was as if they vanished mid-shift. The main control room, located on the ground floor, was a cavern of pale green paint and linoleum tiles. This was the brain of UVB-76. Along the walls stood racks of heavy equipment transmitters, the size of refrigerators, glowing with vacuum tubes and analog dials. These machines were not digital. They were warm, humming beasts that smelled of ozone and hot dust. They were capable of pumping 20 kilowatts of power into the sky. On the desks, explorers found the detritus of a boring, terrifying job. Coffee cups with mold growing inside, ashtrays overflowing with cigarette butt brands that hadn't been sold for years, and logbooks, piles and piles of logbooks. This is one of the most haunting details of the Poverovo site, the sheer bureaucracy of the apocalypse. We have scans of these books in the archive. They are handwritten in blue ink. Day after day, hour after hour, a soldier would sit in that green room, listening to the buzz, and writing down, signal normal, atmosphere stable, 14 o'clock hours, page after page of signal normal, years of it. It creates a hypnotic effect just reading it. It reminds us that for 40 years, men sat in this swamp, waiting for the world to end, and their job was to write down that it hadn't ended yet. But there were other rooms that were not for radio operators. Deep inside the main building, behind a heavy steel door that required a code to open, was the telecommunications hub. This was the link to the Kremlin. Here, the walls were lined with soundproofing foam, now rotting and peeling away like dead skin. In the center of the room, cables hung from the ceiling like vines in a jungle. This is where the monoliths, the coded commands, came from. When the voice spoke the names, Boris, Roman, Olga, the signal traveled through these cables before hitting the transmitter. The atmosphere in these abandoned corridors is heavy. Visitors report a feeling of pressure, a quiet infrasound that presses against the eardrums. Perhaps it is just the wind howling through the broken windows, or perhaps it is the residual energy of a place that channeled millions of volts of electricity for decades. Decades. And then, there is the basement. Every terrifying story has a basement, but the sublevels of the Poverovo bunker are a matter of historical record. The explorers who ventured down the concrete stairs found themselves in a different world. The air temperature drops instantly. The smell changes from pine forest to stagnant water and rust. The basement levels are flooded. Dark, oily water sits stagnant, reflecting the beams of flashlights. But beneath the water, you can see things. metal racks, submerged servers, and tunnels. There are persistent rumors, supported by the layout of the ventilation shafts, that the Poverovo site was not just a bunker, but an entrance, a hub connected to the legendary Metrotu, the secret underground subway system built for the Soviet leadership. The theory suggests that if the nuclear war began, the signal would not just launch missiles, it would also seal the tunnels, turning the underground network into a self-contained city, floating in the water of the basement. One explorer found a specific logbook that has become famous in the intelligence community. It was soaked, the pages swollen, but the ink was waterproof. It contained a list of frequencies and a set of call signs that did not match any known military unit. The Jupiter, the Orion, the Zenith. Were these other stations? Other dead hands? The file does not say. The book was left in the water, returning to the dark. We must also analyze the pink fog incident in the final years of the Poverovo site's operation. Locals reported a strange phenomenon. On cold winter mornings, a low-hanging pinkish mist would sometimes drift from the fenced perimeter. It was chemically sweet, metallic in taste. The official explanation does not exist. However, archival cross-referencing suggests that the station used massive capacitors containing biphenyls, toxic coolants used in electronics. When the equipment began to fail in the late 2000s, these capacitors may have leaked. The soldiers inside were breathing the machine. The pink fog was the blood of the dying system. It adds a layer of biological horror to the electronic mystery. The men who kept the dead hand alive were slowly being poisoned by it. Yet, the logbooks show no interruption in the shift changes. The buzz continued. The loyalty to the signal outweighed the survival of the operators. It is important to visualize the silence of the site today. Nature is reclaiming the Poverovo bunker. Birch trees are growing through the cracks in the concrete courtyard. Moss covers the command desk where the order to launch nuclear weapons would have been verified. The copper wire has been stripped by looters, scavengers who braved the radiation warnings to sell the metal for scrap. But they couldn't steal the ghost, even though the transmitter is gone. Moved to the new site in St. Petersburg, the electromagnetic footprint remains. Amateur radio enthusiasts who visit the coordinates 6018 with handheld scanners still report anomalies. The needle on the compass spins. The static on the radio bands is thicker, denser here than in the surrounding woods. It is as if the Earth itself has been magnetized by 40 years of constant transmission. The swamp remembers. There is a psychological weight to this place. It is a monument to the concept of mutually assured destruction. It is a place built for the sole purpose of ensuring that if we die, everyone dies. Walking through the empty hallways, stepping over the broken glass and the rotting gas masks, you are walking through the architectural manifestation of a suicide pact. The silence of Poverovo is deceptive. It feels abandoned, but in the world of signals intelligence, nothing is ever truly abandoned. The underground cables that fed this beast are still buried in the mud. They run deep, connecting to the power grids of Moscow. Are they live? Is there a backup sensor still ticking away in the flooded sublevels, waiting for a seismic shock? We do not know. The explorers did not bring diving gear. They looked into the black water, and they turned back. As we back away from the coordinates, as we retreat through the birch trees and cross the rusted fence line, we leave the ghost in the swamp. The fog rolls in, covering the gray brick box. The geometric scar in the forest is swallowed by the night. The physical location is dead. But the idea it represents is very much alive. The signal moved, but it did not stop. It merely shed its skin. We have examined the body of the beast. We have seen where it lived. But to understand why it is still breathing, we must look at the timeline. We must go back to the beginning. In the next file, we will examine the genesis. The year 1982, the height of the paranoia. We will look at the very first recording ever captured of the signal, and the intelligence panic it caused in Washington. For now, the archive is closing the folder on the coordinates are logged, the map is folded. The blue light of the server room dims, casting long shadows across the floor. The hum of the cooling fans becomes a steady, rhythmic white noise. Much like the rain falling on the roof of a forgotten bunker. Let the image of the silent forest fade. Let the geometry of the antennas dissolve into the dark. The file is secure. The history is preserved. And you are safe. The history of the end of the world has a specific start date. It does not begin with an explosion. It begins with a beep. If we rewind the tape of history, past the modern era of the internet, past the collapse of the Berlin Wall, and settle on the autumn of 1982, we find a world held together by tension. It was a year of shadows. In Washington, the rhetoric was heating up. In Moscow, the leadership was dying, quite literally, of old age. And in the invisible ocean of the ionosphere, the layer of the atmosphere that reflects radio waves, something new appeared. It was not announced. There was no press conference. There was simply a moment where silence existed, and then, a moment where it did not. A frequency that had been dormant suddenly spiked with voltage, 4,625 kilohertz. The channel opened, the carrier waves stabilized, and the first, rhythmic pulse began to beat against the eardrums of the West. It was the birth cry of a machine, designed to outlive its creators. The file we are unlocking tonight is dated late 1982, is stamped with the classification SIGINT, or Signals Intelligence. It contains the initial reaction of the global intelligence community to this new, persistent anomaly. The file was stamped never open, yet we begin tonight. We are back in the archive. The environment is consistent, cold, blue-lit, and quiet. The air conditioning hums at a low frequency, masking the silence of the underground facility. We pull a heavy box from the metal shelf. The cardboard is brittle, smelling of sulfur and aged adhesive. Inside are the magnetic tapes that captured the very first breaths of the UVB-76 station. To understand the shock of this transmission, we must immerse ourselves in the analog world of 1982. There were no smartphones. There was no global internet. Information traveled slowly, through copper wires and radio waves. The night sky was filled with invisible chatter. Spies communicated with number stations, women's voices, reading groups of 5 numbers to agents in foreign capitals. Military aircraft exchanged weather reports. Embassies sent encrypted teletypes, but the 4,625 kilohertz signal was different. In the early recordings, it did not sound like the harsh, grinding buzzer we hear today. The 1982 anomaly was a 2-tone signal. It was a piercing, repeated pip-pip. It sounded sharp, clinical, and relentless. It was a digital needle pricking the balloon of radio silence. Amateur radio operators were the first to notice. These were the night watchmen of the airwavesmen in basements in London, ham radio enthusiasts in Helsinki, hobbyists in the American Midwest. They sat in darkened rooms, illuminated only by the amber glow of their receiver dials, turning the tuning knobs with slow precision. When they rolled across the 4625 frequency, they stopped. Pip, pip, pip. It was too regular to be natural interference. It was too powerful to be a mistake. The signal strength was immense. It was blasting out of the Soviet Union with enough wattage to be heard clearly in the United States. This required a transmitter of industrial size. It required a dedicated power plant. The letters began to arrive at intelligence agencies. What is this signal? Is it a jammer? Is it a weapon? The CIA and the NSA were already listening. In the windowless rooms of listening posts in West Germany and Turkey, the reels were turning. The analysts were wearing heavy headphones, chain-smoking cigarettes, staring at us. The green line on the screen jumped with every pip. They named it the pip initially, before it evolved into the buzzer. But the name didn't matter. The implication mattered. Why 1982? The timing is the key to the mystery. This is where the story shifts from technical curiosity to geopolitical horror. The year 1982 was the year of Project Ryan. In the history of the Cold War, Project Ryan is the most terrifying secret operation you have likely never heard of. The acronym Ryan stands for Raketnoye Dano Napadina, Russian for nuclear missile attack. The Soviet leadership, specifically the paranoid and aging KGB chairman Yuri and had become convinced that the United States was planning a surprise nuclear first strike. They believed that President Reagan was not just posturing. They believed he was preparing to wipe the Soviet Union off the map, and Andropov ordered the KGB and the GRU military intelligence to look for signs of this impending attack. They were told to watch everything. Watch the lights in the Pentagon if they stay on all night. It means war. Watch the price of blood in London if the price goes up. It means they are stockpiling for casualties. Watch the movement of VIP cars in Washington. Crucially, watch the communications networks. The activation of the 4,625 kHz signal in this specific window of time suggests that it was a direct response to this paranoia. The Soviet military needed a keep-alive signal. They needed a way to instantly confirm that their command structure was intact. If the paranoia of Project Ryan was the disease, the buzzer was the thermometer. As long as the temperature was stable, as long as the pips continued, the patient was alive. Imagine the atmosphere in the Kremlin in those days. Old men in grey suits, walking down long red-carpeted hallways, whispering about the end of the world. They authorized the construction of the massive antenna arrays. They signed the orders to pour concrete into the swamps of Povaruva. They diverted electricity from civilian grids to power these transmitters. They were building a nervous system for a dying state. The 1982 signal was the sound of a country holding its breath. Let us analyze the technical characteristics of that first year. The signal was not just a simple tone. Archival spectral analysis looking at the fingerprint of the sound reveals that the transmitter was unstable. It drifted. Sometimes the pitch would wobble. This indicates that the equipment was being run hot, pushed to its limits. That there is a specific recording from November 10, 1982. This is the day Leonid Brezhnev, the General Secretary of the Soviet Union, died. On that night, the radio waves were chaotic. Funeral music played on official Soviet channels. The West waited to see who would take control of the nuclear codes. And on 4,625 kHz, the pips continued. However, analysts noted a change in the background noise. On the night of Brezhnev's death, the background hiss of the open microphone became louder. There were sounds of movement, shuffling, the scratching of chairs against the floor. It was as if the room where the microphone sat was crowded. Were they reinforcing the bunker? Were extra guards posted? Did an officer walk into that room, look at the spinning tape reels, and wonder if he would be dead by morning? The signal did not stop for the death of the leader. This confirmed the most important theory of Western intelligence. The signal was independent of the political leadership. It was a military channel. It belonged to the general staff. It belonged to the rockets. The archive chill. Experience requires us to focus on the texture of this. Listening, put yourself in the position of an operator in 1982. It is 3 a.m. It is raining outside. The coffee is cold. You are sitting in a bunker in West Berlin. Your job is to listen to a beep. For 8 hours straight. Beep beep beep. It is hypnotic. It is maddening. Your brain starts to invent patterns. You start to hear voices in the static that aren't there. This is a phenomenon known as pareidolia. Mind trying to find meaning in chaos. Many operators reported hearing ghost voices behind the pips, whispers, crying, arguments. Most of this was just the brain misinterpreting the white noise. But some of it was real, that the transmitter at Povarovo was not in a sealed vacuum. It was in a room, and that room had acoustics. In 1982, the technology was vacuum tube-based. These tubes generated immense heat. The room would have been sweltering. Fans would be worried constantly to cool the racks. The hum you hear in the 1982 recordings is the 50 Hz hum of the Soviet electrical grid, leaking into the audio path. You are literally listening to the electricity of the Soviet Union. The file also mentions the triangular network. In 1982, triangulation attempts suggested that 4,625 kHz was not working alone. There were other signals, on other frequencies, that seemed to synchronize with it. A faint signal from the far east, another from the south. They were forming a perimeter. A dead hand is not just one hand, it is a body. The Povarovo transmitter was likely the master node, the primary heartbeat, but it was supported by a chorus of other, fainter ghosts. As the months of 1982 turned into 1983, the most dangerous year of the Cold War, the signal became more robust. The wobble disappeared. The tone became sharper. They had upgraded the hardware. They were digging in. The world was moving toward the brink. The deployment of Pershing II missiles in Europe, the shooting down of Flight Cal 007, the NATO exercise Able Archer 83, which the Soviets almost mistook for a real attack. Through all of these flashpoints, the signal remained the one constant, that it is a chilling realization. The only thing that didn't change during the most volatile period of modern history was this sound. The governments changed. The treaties changed. The borders changed. But the signal did not. It suggests a deep underlying philosophy of the defense establishment. Politics is temporary. Physics is permanent. The logic of the bomb does not care who is president. It only cares if the circuit is closed or open. The 1982 file also contains a report on the interval. The pulses were approximately 1.2 seconds apart. Why this specific timing? Sleep researchers and cognitive scientists have noted that a rhythm of roughly 60 beats per minute or slightly slower mimics the resting human heart rate. It is a biological rhythm. Was this intentional? Unlikely. It was likely determined by the charge-discharge cycle of a capacitor in the timing circuit. But the effect is undeniable. It sounds organic. It sounds like a pulse. When we listen to the 1982 tapes today, we are listening to the heartbeat of a ghost. The Soviet Union is dead. The ideology that built this machine is dead. The men who turned the switch on in 1982 are likely dead. But the machine is not. It is rare for a technological artifact to survive its context so completely. Usually, when a country falls, its systems are turned off, its flags are lowered, its radio stations change format. But UVB-76 is a zombie station. It survived the death of its host. This indicates that the first transmission in 1982 was not just the start of a broadcast, it was the activation of a protocol that cannot be easily deactivated. It is possible that the instructions to turn it off were lost in the chaos of the 1990s, or more likely, no one dares to turn it off. Why take the risk? If the machine has been keeping the demons at bay for 40 years, why touch it? The 1982 file ends with a handwritten note from a British intelligence officer. It is scrawled in the margin of a frequency log. It reads, "Target stationary. Signal continuous. Intent unknown. Suggest monitoring indefinitely." Indefinitely, that word hangs in the air of the archive. We are still in that indefinitely. We are still monitoring. The 1982 file is technically closed, but only because the year ended. The event never ended. As we place the 1982 tape back into its cardboard box, we can feel the weight of time. The magnetic tape is fragile. It can snap. It can degrade. But the signal it recorded is still out there, bouncing off the ionosphere tonight. The rain that fell on the bunker in 1982 has long since evaporated and fallen again. The snow has melted and returned. But the watch continues. On the next file, we will move forward in time. We will look at the science of the sound. We will examine the spectral analysis, the visual shape of the ghost. We will see what the signal looks like when you peel back the layers of static and look at the mathematics hidden underneath. There are patterns in the noise that the human ear cannot hear, but the computer can see. For now, the archive grows quiet. The cooling fans spin down. The blue light flickers once, then steady. The ghosts of 1982 are retreating into the shadows of the shelves. The file is shelved. The secret is safe, and you are safe. The human ear is an imperfect instrument. It can be tricked. It can be fatigued. It can miss the subtle details hidden within a wall of sound. For decades, the world listened to the buzzer on frequency 4625 kHz, and they heard only a monotonous, grinding noise. They heard the surface. But in the world of signals intelligence, what you hear is only half the story. The truth is often found not in the audio, but in the visual. When you feed the signal of UVB-76 into a spectrographer machine that turns sound waves into a visual map, the chaos disappears. In its place, a structure emerges, a geometry, a hidden architecture made of electricity and math. What looks like random static to the naked ear looks like a deliberate, engineered landscape to the computer eye, and hidden within that landscape are patterns that should not exist. The file we are opening tonight is stamped with a classification visual intelligence. It deals with the waterfall, the cascading green and blue display that reveals the ghost in the machine. This is where the mystery moves from the microphone to the microchip. The file was stamped never open, yet we begin tonight. We return to the archive. The heavy steel door clicks shut behind us, sealing out the noise of the modern world. The room is darker tonight. The overhead lights are off. The only illumination comes from the banks of monitors lining the walls. They are glowing with the cold, hypnotic light of the spectrum analyzer. Green waves flowing down a black screen. It looks like digital rain. It looks like a code falling forever into the dark. To understand the spectral analysis of the dead hand, we must first understand the tool. Imagine a waterfall. In a spectral display, time flows from the top of the screen to the bottom. The frequency, the pitch of the sound is mapped from left to right. Silence is black. Quiet sounds are blue. Loud sounds are yellow. And the strongest, most powerful signals are a burning, intense red. When you tune a radio to 4625 kHz and look at the screen, you see a monolith. The carrier wave of the buzzer appears as a solid, thick, vertical line cutting through the darkness. It is perfectly straight. It is unyielding. While other radio stations voice broadcasts, music, weather reports appear as squiggly organic clouds of color that drift and fade, the buzzer is a pillar. It looks like a skyscraper built of pure energy. This visual solidity is the first clue. It tells us that the transmitter is not just powerful, it is anchored. It is locked onto its frequency with a precision that was incredibly expensive to maintain in the analog era of the 1980s. But if you zoom in, if you take that digital magnifying glass and look at the edges of the pillar, the perfection begins to crack. This is where the Tier 1 analysis begins. This is what the casual listener misses. The buzzer is not a sine wave. A sine wave is a smooth, clean, curve, the sound of a pure whistle. The buzzer is a square wave, On the spectral display, this creates harmonics. These are ghost signals that appear at mathematical intervals above and below the main frequency. They look like the rungs of a ladder, stretching up into the radio spectrum. Why use a square wave? It is a harsh, abrasive sound. It is designed to be annoying. It is designed to cut through interference. If you are a nuclear submarine commander submerged deep in the Atlantic, and the world is ending, you do not want a polite signal. You want a signal that screams. You want a signal that tears through the static of a nuclear storm. The visual shape of the buzzer is the shape of a weapon, but the archive logs from 2010 to 2015 reveal something else hidden in the waterfall, embedded within the main signal. Analysts have occasionally spotted subcarrier data. These appear as faint, thin lines running parallel to the main buzz. They are almost invisible. You have to adjust the contrast of the screen to see them. What are these lines? There is a theory in the signals community known as the digital underlay. The theory suggests that the buzzing sound is just a carrier truck carrying a cargo. The cargo is digital data, encrypted telemetry, automated updates being sent to the missile silos. While we are listening to the buzz, the machines are reading the lines. It creates a sensation of paranoia. It means that the noise is a mask. It means that while we are being lulled to sleep by the rhythm, a conversation is happening right in front of us, in a language we cannot speak, between machines we cannot see. Let us focus on the 2016 sidebar anomaly. In the winter of 2016, the spectral signature of UVB76 changed. For a period of 3 weeks, the waterfall display showed a strange, shadowy artifact appearing on the left side of the main signal. It looked like a shadow. It pulsed in time with the buzzer, but it was slightly out of phase. Visually, it looked like a second signal was trying to merge with the first. Was it a technical failure? A broken vacuum tube in the bunker near St. Petersburg? Or was it an intrusion? Some analysts believe this was a man-in-the-middle attack. A foreign intelligence agency, perhaps American, perhaps Chinese, attempting to hijack the frequency. Attempting to synchronize their transmitter with the Russian one, to insert their own commands into the dead hand system. Imagine the silent war taking place on that screen. 2 massive radio transmitters, fighting for dominance of a single frequency, pushing megawatts of power against each other, and on the screen, it just looks like a blurring of the line, a slight distortion in the red pillar. The battle for the end of the world is not fought with explosions. It is fought with voltage, and it is visible only to those watching the waterfall. There is a hypnotic quality to watching it is a visual sedative. The signal repeats, buzz, 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 on the screen. This creates a pattern of horizontal dashes, dash, dash, dash. As the screen scrolls down, these dashes form a road, a highway of red bricks paving the way into the past. Many people use these spectral videos for sleep. There is a comfort in the consistency. In a chaotic world, where news changes every hour and markets crash, the buzzer is constant. The road on the screen never curves. It never ends. But the archive chill demands we look at the interruptions. The flaws in the road. There are moments recorded in the archive where the waterfall tears. The straight lines become jagged. The colors bleed. This is known as ionospheric flutter. It happens when the sun hits the atmosphere in a specific way, or when the northern lights are active. The radiation from space twists the radio waves. On the screen, it looks like the signal is melting. It looks like the dead hand is dissolving. In these moments, the sound changes too. The buzz becomes hollow, flanging, metallic. It sounds like a robot screaming in a tunnel. For the operators in the bunker, this is a moment of tension. If the signal degrades too much, the remote systems might misinterpret it. They might think the signal has stopped. They might think the command has been broken. So, the operators have to crank up the power. You can see this on the spectrograph. The red line suddenly glows brighter, wider. A surge of energy, a human hand turning a dial, fighting against the sun itself to keep the message clear. We are here. Do not launch. The file also contains a section on the intruder images. This is the most controversial part of the spectral history. There are rumors, unsubstantiated, but persistent, that hackers have successfully embedded images into the waterfall display of 4625 kHz. The technology is called SSTV slow scan television. It allows you to encode a picture into sound. If you play the sound into a decoder, the picture appears. In 2013, during a period of heavy pirate jamming, the waterfall display briefly showed geometric shapes that were not natural. Triangles, smiley faces, crude text. This was a violation of the sanctum. The dead hand was being graffiti tagged. But what is truly chilling is how the system responded. It didn't shut down. It didn't change frequency. it simply overpowered them. The main buzzer signal increased in amplitude, wiping the graffiti off the screen like a windshield wiper clearing mud. It was a show of force, a reminder that while hackers can play games, the system owns the frequency. We must also consider the silence gaps. On the spectral display, silence is the most terrifying color. Silence is black. There are thin black horizontal lines in the waterfall history, tiny fractions of a second where the transmitter cut out. To the ear, you might miss it, but the eye sees the gap. These gaps are the heart skips. Every time you see a black line on the chart, that was a moment where the failsafe mechanism engaged. A generator failed, a tube blew out, a switch tripped. For 0.5 seconds, the world was at risk. Then the backup kicked in, and the red line returned. Looking at a 10-year history of the signal, you can see hundreds of these black lines, hundreds of moments where the gun was cocked, but the trigger wasn't pulled. It makes you realize how fragile the piece really is. It is a flickering light bulb that the archive chill aesthetic is about the beauty of this data. There is a cold, stark beauty to the spectral waterfall. The colors phosphor green, deep ocean blue, alarm radar, the colors of the modern age. We are looking at the heartbeat of the 20th century, still beating in the 21st. There is a psychological phenomenon called the watchers, trance intelligence analysts who stare at these screens for 12-hour shifts often report a sense of detachment. The data becomes the world. The red line becomes the only reality. They stop hearing the buzz. They only see the flow. In this state, the mind begins to wonder, what if the line stops? If the red pillar were to vanish from the screen, what would replace it? First there would be blackness, total silence. Then, perhaps, new signals would appear. Fast, chaotic, high-pitched screams of data. The launch codes, the targeting coordinates, the monoliths waking up. The screen would fill with a chaotic storm of colors, the visual representation of the end of civilization. But for now, the line holds. The spectral analysis of UVB76 teaches us that there is order in the chaos. The noise is not random, it is maintained, it is groomed us. We stare at the monitor in the archive. Watching the green data scroll down, we are essentially watching a candle flame. We are watching to make sure it doesn't go out. The mathematics of the wave are precise. The frequency 4625.00 kHz is held to a variance of less than 10 Hz. That is incredible stability for analog equipment. It speaks to the dedication of the engineers. Who are they? The men and women who keep the line straight. We don't see them, we only see their work. We see the result of their labor in the glowing pixels of the display. They are the curators of the waterfall. We power down the monitor. The waterfall freezes, then fades into the gray glass of the screen. The room returns to darkness. The blue afterimage of the signal lingers in our eyes for a moment, a ghost of a ghost. The spectral analysis is complete. We have seen the shape of the sound. We have seen the structure of the threat. But there is one thing the spectrograph cannot show us. It can show us the machine. It can show us the power, but it cannot show us the human element. The machine does not breathe. The machine does not sigh. The machine does not cough. And yet, in the audio recordings, we hear these things. Behind the perfect square wave, behind the red wall of digital fire, there is a person. In the next file, we will leave the visual world and return to the audio. We will isolate the background noise. We will turn up the volume on the silence between the buzzers. We are going to listen to the live microphone. We are going to find out who is breathing in the bunker. The archive is closing for the night. The data is saved. The screen is dark. Sleep well. The red line is still glowing in the dark, somewhere in the north. For 40 years, the world believed it was listening to a machine. The grinding, monotonous buzz of 4625 kHz was so precise, so relentless, that it felt like the heartbeat of an automated doomsday device. We assumed it was a computer. We assumed it was a synthesizer locked in a lead-lined box, buried deep beneath the permafrost. But the archive reveals a truth that is far more unsettling. The file we are opening tonight contains the audio analysis that shattered the illusion of automation. It proves that the dead hand is not just a circuit board, it is a room, and in that room there is a microphone, and that microphone has been left open, recording the air, the dust, and the silence, 24 hours a day, since the height of the Cold War. The terrifying reality is not that the machine is buzzing. The reality is that behind the buzz, someone is breathing. The file is stamped with the classification acoustic anomaly. It details the moments when the machine paused, and the human element broke through. The coughs, the footsteps, the whispers in the dark, The file was stamped never open, yet we begin tonight. We enter the archive. The heavy steel door seals behind us, cutting off the noise of the outside world. Here the air is still and cold. The smell of old ozone and decaying paper fills the room. The only light comes from the amber glow of the vacuum tubes on the playback machine. We are not just looking at data tonight. We are listening to ghosts. We are tuning our ears to the background noise of the most dangerous radio station on Earth. To understand the live microphone theory, we must first understand the insanity of the engineering. In the modern world, if you want to broadcast a repeating signal, you use a digital loop. You burn the sound onto a chip, and it plays forever, perfect and unchanging. But the Soviet military engineers of the 1970s did not trust chips. They trusted physics, they trusted copper, and they trusted men. The buzzer is not generated inside the transmitter. It is generated by a device, perhaps a rotating tone wheel, or a small synthesizer placed next to a microphone. Think about the implications of that. It means that for decades, there has been a physical space, a bunker, a room, a closet where this sound is blaring live, and suspended in that room is an open mic. It is the longest conference call in history. It is a telephone line that has never been hung up. And because the microphone is live, it hears everything. When we scrub through the audio archives, filtering out the loud buzzing tone, we are left with the room tone. This is the sonic fingerprint of the bunker. It is a low-frequency rumble. It is the sound of air moving through concrete ducts. It is the sound of isolation, but sometimes, the isolation is broken. There is a famous recording from 2001. It is late at night. The buzz is rhythmic, hypnotic. Buzz, buzz, buzz. And then, faintly, in the background, you hear it. Tap, tap, slide. It is the sound of footsteps. Heavy boots on a linoleum floor. Someone is walking past the microphone. For the listener, sitting alone in their room in the dark, this moment is electric. It breaks the trance. It reminds us that there is a human being at the other end of the radio wave. Who is he? Is he a soldier, a technician, a guard? He is walking through a room filled with the noise of the apocalypse, checking the dials, perhaps drinking a cup of tea, while the entire Western intelligence community listens to his boots hit the floor. The live mic anomalies transform the buzzer from a piece of technology into a psychological drama. Imagine the life of the operator. You are stationed in a remote military unit, surrounded by swamp and forest. Your job is to sit in a room with a screaming noise, watching a needle on a gauge. You cannot talk, you cannot play music, you must simply exist, in silence, alongside the noise. But humans are not designed for silence. In November 2010, another anomaly occurred. The buzzing stopped for a moment, likely due to a power fluctuation. In the sudden silence, the microphone gained the sensitivity automatically increased. It was searching for sound. And it found one. A phone rang. Somewhere deep in the bunker, a standard landline telephone began to ring. It rang 3 times. Burring, burring, burring. Then a voice, distant, muffled, echoing down a hallway, shouted something in Russian. The tone was annoyed. It sounded like an officer yelling at a subordinate to answer the line. Then the buzzing returned, drowning out the domestic drama. This fragment of audio is terrifying because it is so mundane. It creates a contrast that the mind struggles to process. We are listening to the dead hand, the system designed to launch nuclear missiles if Russia is destroyed. And yet, inside the heart of this system, people are just doing a job. The phone rings. People yell. The coffee gets cold. It suggests that the end of the world will not be dramatic. It will be administrative. It will happen while someone is answering the phone. The file also contains the whisper logs. Over the years, listeners have isolated moments where the microphone picked up conversations. These are usually too faint to decipher, buried under layers of static and the hum of the transmitter. But sometimes, words float to the surface. I am cold. Bring the logbook. The generator is vibrating. These snippets of dialogue are like fragments of a play performed in the dark. They humanize the enemy. During the height of the Cold War, Americans were taught to fear the Soviets as faceless monsters. But the live microphone reveals that the men with their fingers near the button were just men. Men who were cold, men who were bored. There is a specific incident from 2006 that stands out. It is known in the archive as the Psi. It was 4 a.m. Moscow time. The signal was clear. The atmospheric noise was low. Between 2 buzzers, a sound cut through the static. A long, deep exhalation. A sigh of exhaustion. It was vivid. It sounded close to the mic. You could hear the friction of the air in the throat. Was the operator sleeping? Did he lean forward, resting his head on the desk, right next to the open line? That single sigh was broadcast to the entire world. It traveled thousands of miles, bouncing off the ionosphere, to be recorded by enthusiasts in Japan and the Netherlands. We heard a Russian soldier tired of his watch. It is a moment of profound intimacy. In that second, there were no borders. There was just the universal sound of human fatigue. But the live microphone is not always peaceful. There are darker sounds in the archive, sounds that suggest that the bunker is not a happy place. In the early 1990s, shortly after the collapse of the Soviet Union, there were recordings of shouting, violent, distorted shouting, the banging of metal against metal. Was it a fight, a drunken brawl, or was it a breakdown of discipline as the country fell apart outside the walls? We have to remember the context. These men were guarding a doomsday machine for a country that no longer existed. Their paychecks had stopped coming, the food supplies were low, but the order remained: keep the signal live. The archive chill requires us to sit with that tension, to visualize the flickering fluorescent lights in the green-walled room, the smoke from cheap cigarettes hanging in the air, the smell of sweat and fear. The microphone captured it all. It didn't judge, it just transmuted. There is also the question of the dog. This is one of the strangest anomalies in the file. On several occasions, analysts have sworn they heard a dog barking in the background of the broadcast. A dog, in a high-security nuclear command post. It seems impossible, and yet, the audio analysis is compelling. The acoustic signature matches the bark of a large breed, likely a guard dog. This paints a vivid picture: the loneliness of the outpost, the soldiers bringing the guard dog inside to get warm during the bitter Russian winter, the dog sleeping under the console where the launch codes are entered. It adds a layer of surrealism to the threat. We imagine high-tech computers and lasers. The reality is a wet dog shaking itself dry next to a microphone that controls the fate of millions. The live mic also explains the glitches. Sometimes, the buzzer sounds distorted. It sounds woolly or muffled. If the sound were digital, this wouldn't happen. Digital is either on or off, but because it is an acoustic setup, the physical environment matters. If the humidity in the room goes up, the sound changes. If someone leaves a door open and a draft blows through, the sound changes. We are literally listening to the weather inside the bunker. There are moments when the buzzing sounds distant, as if the microphone has fallen off its stand. There are moments where it sounds incredibly loud, as if someone is holding it, and then there are the voice messages. This is the ultimate purpose of the live mic. The buzzing is just a placeholder. It is the dial tone. The system exists so that, at any moment, a voice can interrupt. UVB 76. UVB 76, 93,882. When the voice speaks, the buzzing usually stops, or it is turned down. You can hear the click of the switch. The voice is usually male, but occasionally female. It is harsh, monotone, robotic, but it is human. You can hear the intake of breath before the numbers. You can hear the hesitation if they misread a digit. These mistakes are the most terrifying part. If a computer sends a launch code, it is instant. But a human can hesitate. A human can stutter. There is a recording where the announcer starts to read a code, stops, coughs, and starts again. Isbanet, excuse me, he apologized. He apologized to the spies listening in Washington. He apologized to the world for stuttering while reading a message that might be a military drill, or a preparation for war. It is absurd, it is terrifying, and it is deeply, undeniably human. As we lie here tonight, listening to the silence of our own rooms, we must realize that the microphone is still on right now. At this very second, somewhere in the Leningrad military district, in a room buried beneath the earth, that microphone is listening. Is the operator awake? Is he reading a book? Is he tapping his pen on the desk? If you were to tune a radio to 4,625 kHz right now, and if you had the right equipment to filter out the buzz, you could hear the room tone. You could hear the atmosphere of the dead hand. It is a connection that spans continents. An invisible thread tying your ear to the mouth of a bunker in Russia. The file on the live microphone teaches us that there is no such thing as a perfect system. There is always biology. There is always error. There is always breath. The machine may be the hand that holds the sword, but the hand is connected to a body, and the body is tired. We close the file on the acoustics. We lower the volume on the playback. The static fades. The footsteps retreat into the distance. We are left with the silence of the archive. But now, the silence feels different. We know that silence is not empty. We know that somewhere a microphone is waiting for a sound. In the next file, we will examine the moment when the system truly failed. We have heard the breathing. Now we must look at the day the breathing stopped. The day the signal died. The day the world held its breath for the anomaly of 2010. The archive is closing. The tape is The blue light pulses once, then fades to black dots. Sleep well, and listen closely. There is a terrifying logic to the end of the world. We often imagine the apocalypse as a chaotic event, a moment of fire, panic, and noise. But in the eyes of the engineers who built the Soviet Union's defense architecture, the apocalypse was not chaos. It was a procedure. It was a flowchart. They realized that in a nuclear war, the weakest link was not the missile, or the radar, or the silo. The weakest link was the human being. Humans hesitate. Humans feel fear. Humans die. So, in the cold silence of the early 1980s, they built a solution. They built a system designed to remove the human element from the equation entirely. They created a machine that could wake up after the country had died, check the sensors, confirm that there was no one left to give orders, and then, with robotic precision, launch everything. The file we are opening tonight is the core document of this series. It is the schematic of the perimeter system known to the West as the Dead Hand. This is not just a radio station. This is the mechanism of the guillotine. The file was stamped never open, yet we begin tonight. We descend deeper into the archive than we have ever gone before. The air here is pressurized. The walls are reinforced concrete, 3 meters thick. The blue light of the server room reflects off the polished steel of the databanks. We are looking at the blueprints of a nightmare, but we must look at them with a calm, analytical eye. We must understand the machine that is sleeping beneath the snow. To understand system perimeter, we must first understand the fear that created it. The year was 1983. The Cold War had turned to ice. The leadership in Moscow was convinced that the United States was developing a weapon that could decapitate the Kremlin in less than 5 minutes. They feared a first strike so fast, and so accurate, that the Soviet General Secretary would be vaporized before he could reach the phone. If the Commander-in-Chief is dead, who gives the order to retaliate? If the General Staff is gone, who unlocks the codes? In a normal military, if the command is cut off, the soldiers stand down. But in nuclear strategy, this is unacceptable. If the enemy knows that killing the leader stops the war, they will kill the leader. So, the Soviets asked a question that no one should ever have to ask. How do we ensure revenge from beyond the grave? The answer was automation. The perimeter system was designed to be the ultimate It is a dormant artificial intelligence, primitive by modern standards, but robust. It is a spider sitting in the center of a vast web of sensors, waiting for a vibration. The system is not located in a single bunker. It is everywhere. Imagine the vast, frozen landscape of Russia. From the forests of Poverovo to the mountains of the Urals, buried deep in that soil are seismic sensors. These are not ordinary earthquake detectors. They are calibrated to detect the specific, sharp shockwave of a nuclear impact. They listen to the earth. They listen for the thud of a warhead hitting the ground. But the earth is noisy. Trucks cause vibrations. Earthquakes happen. So the system needs more data. Scattered across the country are radiation sensors. These gamma sniffers taste the wind. They are looking for the sudden spike of ionizing radiation that comes from a nuclear fireball. And there are pressure sensors, barometers designed to detect the sudden change in air pressure, caused by a shockwave moving at the speed of sound. All of these sensors feed data into a central logic unit. This computer is the brain of the Dead Hand. It sits in a hardened bunker, perhaps near Mount Yamantau, humming quietly in the dark. The logic of the computer is simple. It follows an if-then protocol. If the seismic sensors detect a shock, and the radiation sensors detect a spike, and this is the most critical part, communication with the General Staff is lost. Then. The system wakes up. It assumes the worst. It assumes that Moscow is a crater. It assumes that the people who built it are ash. And it initiates the countdown. But the designers of Perimeter were not monsters. They were engineers. They knew that a computer glitch could destroy the world. So they built in safeguards. The system does not launch immediately. It enters a judgment mode. In this mode, the system effectively asks, is anyone still there? It checks the frequency 4625 kHz, the buzzer. It checks the secure military lines. It listens for the keep-alive signals. If it hears the heartbeat of the command structure, it goes back to sleep. It realizes, okay, there was an explosion, but the leadership is still transmitting. I will wait. But if there is silence, if the seismic shock is registered, and the radiation is high, and the radio lines are dead, then the machine makes the decision that it transfers authority from the dead. humans to the living circuit. This brings us to the most fascinating and terrifying component of the perimeter system, the command rocket. Most missiles are designed to fly from point A to point B and explode. They are delivery trucks for death. But the perimeter system has a special kind of missile. Its designation is 15A11. It is a radio station strapped to a rocket engine. If the dead hand decides to act, it does not send a signal through the cables. Cables can be cut, phone lines can be burned. Instead, it opens the silo of a 15A11 command rocket that the rocket launches. It streaks up into the atmosphere, flying high over the entire territory of Russia. As it flies, it does not look for a target. It transmits. It broadcasts a powerful encrypted radio signal down to the earth below. It screams a specific code to every single nuclear silo, submarine, and mobile launcher in the nation. Launch. The silos on the ground are programmed to obey this signal automatically. They do not need a key turn. They do not need a code from a general. When they hear the song of the command rocket flying overhead, they unlock, their covers slide back, and they empty their payloads. That is a symphony of destruction conducted by a flying radio tower. That archive chill requires us to visualize this moment. Imagine the silence of a post-attack Russia. The cities are burning, the people are gone, the snow is falling on the ruins, and then, from a hidden silo in a forest that hasn't been touched, a single rocket rises on a pillar of fire. It climbs into the gray sky. It is the only thing moving in a dead world. And as it passes overhead, the ground opens up, and thousands of other missiles rise to join it. It is the ultimate act of defiance. It is a machine fulfilling its last order, even when there is no one left to thank it. But is the system strictly automated? This is a subject of intense debate in the intelligence community. The file contains conflicting reports. Some defectors claim that the dead hand is fully automatic, that once it is turned on, it is a doomsday machine in the truest sense unstoppable. Others claim that it is semi-automatic. They say that the system creates the permission to launch, but a human or junior officer locked deep in a spherical bunker must still press the final button. Think about that officer. He is not a general. He is not a politician. He is a mid-level technician. He is sitting in a reinforced sphere, suspended on shock absorbers to survive a nuclear hit. The world above him has ended. The lights have flickered and gone to backup red emergency power. The air is recycled, and on his screen, a message flashes. Perimeter active. Authorization granted. He knows what it means. It means everyone he loves is dead. It means the capital is gone. It means the chain of command has evaporated. The machine has done the math and handed him the gun. Does he press the button? The psychology of this moment is heavy. The system relies on the fact that this person has nothing left to lose. Retaliation is no longer about survival. It is about punishment. It is about ensuring that the enemy does not survive either. The buzzer on 4625 kHz acts as the heartbeat for this entire organism. As long as the buzz continues, the system knows that the main node is alive. The buzz is the lullaby that keeps the command rockets in their silos. This is why the 2010 anomaly, which we will explore in the next file, was so terrifying. When the buzzing stopped, the question wasn't just, why is the radio silent? The question was, does the machine think we are dead? The brilliance of the perimeter system is its redundancy. It is not one computer. It is a network. If the sensors in the West are destroyed, the sensors in the East take over. If the command post in Moscow is hit, the command post in the Urals activates. That is designed to operate in a high radiation environment. Modern electronics are sensitive to EMP electromagnetic pulses. A nuclear explosion creates a massive EMP that fries microchips. Your phone, your laptop, your car, they would all stop working instantly. But the dead hand was built with vacuum tubes and hardened wiring. Vacuum tubes are primitive, big, and hot, but they are tough. An EMP passes right through them. The Soviet engineers chose durability over speed. They built a system that could think slowly, but would never stop thinking. Let us look at the modern status section of the file. The Soviet Union collapsed in 1991. The flag came down. The ideology died. But did the dead hand die? In 2011, the commander of the Strategic Missile Forces of Russia confirmed it. The system perimeter is on combat duty. It is still there. The upgrades have been made. The computers are likely faster now. The sensors are more sensitive, but the core logic remains. The 15A11 command rockets are still sitting in their silos. The seismic sensors are still listening to the earth, and the buzzer is still buzzing. There is a philosophical weight to this. We live our lives, go to work, fall in love, and sleep, assuming that the world is safe. But beneath the surface, There is a loaded gun pointed at the head of civilization, held by a computer program written in 1983. The archive chill feeling comes from the realization that we are guests in a world managed by machines. The system is quiet. It doesn't make headlines. It doesn't tweet. It just waits. It waits for the seismic signature of a 50-megaton warhead. It waits for the silence on the radio bands that it is the most patient observer in history. Imagine the maintenance crews who visit these sites today. They drive out into the tundra in heavy trucks. They unlock the gates. They descend into the bunkers to replace a fuse, or check the fuel levels of the generator. Do they look at the blinking lights of the perimeter server and feel fear? Or do they just see a job? System check complete. Logic unit functional. They sign the logbook. They lock the door. And they drive away, leaving the machine alone in the dark. The beauty of the dead hand, if there can be beauty in such a thing, is its purity. It has no politics. It has no hatred. It has no fear. It only has a protocol: if X, then Y. It is the ultimate expression of the Cold War's madness. We built a machine to ensure that even if we lose, no one wins. As we prepare to close this file, we must consider the fragility of the inputs. The system relies on data. It relies on sensors, but sensors can malfunction. Wires can corrode. Software can have bugs. What happens if the machine gets confused? What happens if a meteor strike looks like a nuclear explosion to a seismic sensor? What happens if a solar flare blinds the radar? This is where the anomaly comes in. We have established the perfection of the machine's design, but in the next file, we will examine the cracks in the armor. We will look at the day in 2010 when the heartbeat stopped. The day the system experienced a seizure. Was it a test? Was it a failure? Or was it the machine waking up, blinking its eyes, and deciding to go back to sleep? The archive is vast, but the file on the perimeter is the heaviest one we hold. It is the file that explains why the buzzing sound is not annoying. It is essential. The buzz is the sound of the machine saying, "I am waiting, I am waiting, I am waiting." We slide the blueprints back into the tube. We turn off the light table. The schematic of the command rocket fades into the darkness. The air in the archive is cold. The server hum is steady. Sleep well. The machine is on duty, so you don't have to be. There was a specific moment in the 20th century when humanity decided that it was too slow to save itself. It was not a moment marked by a speech or a treaty. It was a moment marked by a math problem. As the Cold War evolved, the speed of destruction increased. In the 1950s, a bomber plane took 10 hours to cross the ocean. That gave generals 10 hours to think, to drink coffee, to call their families, to negotiate. But by the 1970s, the invention of the intercontinental ballistic missile compressed those 10 hours into 30 minutes. And by the 1980s, submarine-launched missiles compressed those 30 minutes into 10 minutes. That is not enough time for a human being to process the moral weight of ending civilization. Humans panic. Humans hesitate. Humans hope for a mistake. So, the engineers realized that if they wanted to win a nuclear war, they had to remove the human variable. They had to hand the gun to a calculator. The file we are tonight is classified under cybernetic warfare doctrine. It details the terrifying transition from the man in the loop to the man on the loop, and finally, to the loop that runs itself. We are looking at the moment we automated the apocalypse. The file was stamped "never open," yet we begin tonight. We enter the archive. The room has changed. We are no longer in the damp bunker of the radio operator. We are in the clean, sterile center of the logic core. The walls here are lined with floor-to-ceiling server racks. The air is filtered, dry and cold. The smell is of heated copper and dust burning on vacuum tubes. The only light comes from the blinking grids of the status indicators: amber, green, and red. We are walking through the brain of the beast to understand why we gave the power of death to machines. We must look at the concept of launch on warning. In the early days of the nuclear age, the strategy was ride out. If the enemy attacked, you would wait until the bombs hit, survive the blast, and then fire back from the ruins. But as weapons became more accurate, the silos themselves became targets. The generals realized that if they waited for the impact, there would be nothing left to shoot back with, so the strategy changed. They had to launch the missiles while the enemy missiles were still in the air. This created a paradox of time. Imagine sitting in a radar station in Siberia or Alaska. Your screen shows a cluster of thermal blooms rising over the horizon. The computer calculates the trajectory. Impact in 15 minutes. In those 15 minutes, the data has to travel from the radar to the command center, to the analysis team, to the general, to the president, and then back down to the silos. 15 minutes for a chain of command that usually takes days to make a decision. The psychological pressure of this timeline was impossible. No human mind can rationalize the death of 1 billion people in the time it takes to boil an egg. The stress causes cognitive freeze, the paralysis of analysis, so the engineers stepped in. They argued that the only thing fast enough to fight a nuclear war was a computer. The automation began with the sensors. We stopped looking with our eyes and started looking with algorithms. Consider the OCO satellite system. These were the eyes of the Soviet Union in space. They were looking for the infrared signature of a rocket engine against the black background of space. But space is not empty. The sun reflects off clouds. The moon rises. Comets pass by. To a human eye, a reflection looks like a reflection. To a primitive 1980s computer, a reflection looks like a missile. The archive contains logs of false positives. These are the hallucinations of the machine. On dozens of occasions, the automated systems woke up screaming. They saw patterns in the noise that wasn't there. They saw attack formations in the sunlight, and each time they sent a signal to the central logic core. Attack detected. Recommend counterstrike. This is the terrifying reality of the black box. When you automate a system, you hide the logic. You put the decision-making process inside a box that no one can see. You feed data in one side, and death comes out the other. The perimeter system, the dead hand, was the ultimate black box. It was designed to take the emotion out of the apocalypse. A machine does not care about the future. It does not care about history. It does not care about the radiation poisoning that will kill the trees and the birds. It only cares about the state of its variables. Is variable a seismic shock active? Is variable B becomes loss active? If yes, execute program omega. There is a cold, metallic purity to this logic. It is the logic of a spreadsheet applied to genocide. The archive chill demands we look at the hardware that runs this logic. We are not talking about modern, sleek microchips. We are talking about the iron hardware of the late Cold War. Giant magnetic tape reels spinning jerkily in glass cabinets. Punch cards with holes punched in them, representing the targeting coordinates of New York, London, Washington. These machines were loud. They generated immense heat. They required massive cooling systems, industrial air conditioners that roared day and night. If you stood in the server room of the dead hand in 1985, the noise would be deafening. It was the sound of a mechanical brain thinking, clack dash clack dash clack dash whirrrr. And if the power failed, the automation extended to the survival of the machine itself. These systems were equipped with uninterruptible power supplies. Massive banks of lead-acid batteries and diesel generators that would kick in within milliseconds. Even if the power grid of the entire continent went down, the brain would keep thinking. It would keep processing. It is a haunting image, a dark, frozen world where the only lights still on are the LEDs on a computer panel, calmly calculating the trajectory of a missile that has already been launched. But the most dangerous part of automation is the feedback loop. Systems like Perimeter were designed to interact with other systems. The radar talks to the computer talks to the radio talks to the rocket. But what if the enemy is also automated? Game theorists in the 1970s simulated a scenario called the machine war. In this scenario, a computer on side A detects a minor anomaly, maybe a flock of birds, or a computer glitch. It raises its alert level to DEFCON 3. The computer on side B detects this change in electronic activity. It interprets it as a preparation for war, so it raises its alert level to DEFCON 2. Computer A sees this escalation and calculates that an attack is imminent. It raises to DEFCON 1. Computer B sees DEFCON 1 and launches. In this scenario, no human ever wanted a war. No politician gave an order. The machines simply scared each other into destroying the world. They were locked in a logic loop of paranoia, escalating faster than any human could reach the stop button. This is why the keep alive signal of UVB76 is so critical. It is the only human intervention left in the loop. It is the dead man's switch. As long as the humans are manually resetting the timer, manually refueling the generator, manually keeping the buzzer buzzing, the machines are held back. But the trend of history is toward more automation, not less. In the file, there are references to AI-assisted targeting. Modern systems use neural networks to identify targets. They can learn, they can adapt, but can they understand mercy? A computer cannot understand the concept of a bluff. It cannot understand data. It only understands probability. And in a nuclear standoff, the probability of survival goes down the longer you wait. So the computer will always choose to strike first. It is the mathematically correct decision. It is also the morally bankrupt decision. We must also consider the psychology of the screen. The men who monitor these automated systems sit in front of screens. In the 1980s, they were round, green phosphor oscilloscopes. Today, they are high-definition LCDs, but the effect is the same. The screen turns reality into a video game. When you automate the apocalypse, you turn cities into pixels. You turn millions of lives into a blip on a radar. It makes the unthinkable bearable. It is easier to watch a green dot disappear than to watch a city burn. The operators of the dead hand are not looking at the world. They are looking at a simulation of the world created by the machine. And if the machine lies, if the machine shows a green dot where there is none, the operator reacts to the lie. There is a section in the file titled the 1995 Norwegian Incident. This is a prime example of automation gone wrong. Russian radar systems detected a rocket launching from Norway. The automated trajectory analysis computer flagged it as a US Trident missile, likely an EMP attack designed to blind Russian radar. The automated alarm sounded. The nuclear briefcase was activated. President Yeltsin was handed the codes. The system had begun the countdown. For several minutes, the fate of the world hung on the accuracy of an algorithm. The machine said, "Attack." The humans hesitated. It turned out the rocket was a scientific probe studying the northern lights. The computer had misidentified it. It was a math error. If the system had been fully automated, the dead hand had been in full control without a human check, the missiles would have flown. We would not be here tonight. We were saved by hesitation. We were saved by the inefficiency of the human mind. The archive chill asks us to reflect on this. We strive for perfection in our machines. We want them to be faster, smarter, flawless. But in the business of nuclear war, perfection is dangerous. We need the flaw. We need the hesitation. The automated systems are still running today. They are silent sentinels. Deep in the servers, the code is still cycling. IF attack equals true. Ben launch equals true. It is a simple line of code. It takes up no memory, but it carries the weight of the world. The scary truth of the automated apocalypse is that the machines are not evil. They are not Skynet. They do not hate us. They are simply indifferent. They are obedient. They will do exactly what we told them to do. We told them, if you see a flash, burn the world. And they are sitting there, in the dark, with their electronic eyes wide open, waiting for the flash dot as we stare at the blinking cursor on our own screens. We feel a strange kinship with those old mainframes. We are all just processing data in the dark. The file on automation is thick with diagrams of logic gates and flowcharts. It is a dry, technical document, but if you read between the lines, it is a suicide note written in binary dot. We are closing this section of the archive. The tape reels slow down and stop. The cooling fans spin down into a low hum. The green phosphor fades from the screen, leaving only the reflection of our own faces in the glass. We have built a cage for ourselves, made of logic and wire, and we have handed the key to the machine. In the next file, we will move from the computer brain to the physical fist. We will look at the command rocket, the 15A11, the missile that doesn't kill people, but kills silence. The missile that flies over the world to shout the final order. The system is in standby mode. The cursor is blinking dot. Sleep well. The algorithm is watching the sky for you. In the taxonomy of weapons, there is a distinct category for devices designed to kill. There are bullets, there are bombs, and there are missiles. But in the deepest classified archives of the Soviet strategic rocket forces, there exists a weapon that was not designed to kill a single person. It carries no explosives. It carries no nuclear warhead. It carries no biological agent. It is a missile designed to carry a voice. It is the most expensive, complex, and terrifying radio transmitter ever built. Its purpose is not to destroy a target, but to scream a command across an entire continent after the silence of extinction has fallen. When this rocket flies, it means the war is already over. It means the humans are gone, and it is flying to tell the machines that it is time to finish the job. The file we are unlocking tonight is designated under the code. Name 15A11. It is the blueprint of the command rocket. It is the physical messenger of the dead hand. The file was stamped, never open, yet we begin tonight. We return to the archive. The atmosphere here is heavy. The air is recycled and carries the metallic temps of preserved history. We are walking down the row of shelves dedicated to ballistic hardware. We pull a large heavy cylinder from the Raka canister containing the microfilm schematics of a rocket that was never meant to be seen by the naked eye. To understand the 15A11, we must visualize the problem of the apocalypse on a nuclear war. The first thing to die is communication. Electromagnetic pulses EMPs will fry the telephone lines. They will burn out the shortwave radios. They will blind the satellites. The ionosphere itself, the layer of the atmosphere used to bounce radio signals, will be churned into chaos by the radiation of hundreds of nuclear fireballs. So, if you are a dead-hand computer, and you have decided to launch a retaliatory strike, how do you tell the silos? You cannot call them, you cannot email them. The airwaves are a storm of static. The Soviet engineers came up with a solution that was brutal in its simplicity. If you cannot send a signal through the atmosphere, you must rise above it. You build a radio station, you strap it to the top of an intercontinental ballistic missile, and you fire it into space. This is the 15A11. On the outside, it looks like a standard UR-100N missile. It is a massive, liquid-fueled beast, standing nearly 80 feet tall. It sits in a reinforced concrete silo, hidden beneath the forests of Russia. To a satellite looking down, it looks like just another weapon. But inside the nose cone, where the nuclear warhead should be, there is a dense cluster of electronics. There is a powerful radio transmitter. There are batteries, and there are antennas designed to deploy in the vacuum of space. Imagine the sequence. The sensors trigger. The dead hand wakes up. It sends a signal to the 15A11 silo. The 100-ton concrete lid of the silo slides back. The engines ignite. The rocket rises on a pillar of fire, leaving the burning world behind. It climbs through the clouds, through the smoke, and punches into the black silence of low Earth orbit. As it arcs across the sky, traveling from the west of Russia to the east, the nose cone opens. The antennas unfold, and it begins to broadcast. It acts as a temporary, artificial satellite. It beams a high-priority signal directly down to the Earth below. Because it is directly overhead, the signal is strong. It cuts through the interference. It cuts through the jamming. It screams one hexadecimal code, over and over again, and down below, buried in the snow, the receiver antennas on hundreds of other silos hear it. They are listening for this specific song from the sky. When they hear it, they unlock. The command rocket is the conductor of the orchestra. When it raises its baton, the rest of the choir begins to sing. The archive chill asks us to appreciate the engineering challenge here. Radio transmitters are delicate. They have vacuum tubes, glass components, sensitive wires. A rocket launch is violent. It vibrates with the force of thousands of pounds of thrust. How do you build a radio that can survive a rocket launch? The file details the shock-proofing measures. The transmitter assembly in the 15A11 was suspended in a bath of inert oil, or mounted on complex spring dampers. It had to be robust enough to be shaken violently for 5 minutes, frozen in the cold of space, and still function perfectly for the 30-minute duration of its flight. If the radio failed, the retaliation failed. If the radio broke, the dead hand was severed, so they over-engineered it. They built it like a tank that could fly. We must also consider the fuel. The 15A11 uses a liquid fuel propellant. In the early days of rocketry, you had to fuel the rocket before launch. This took hours, but the dead hand does not have hours. It has minutes, so the engineers developed ampulization. They sealed the corrosive fuel inside the rocket at the factory. They welded it shut. The rocket sits in the silo, fully fueled, like a canned good. It can sit there for 10, 20, maybe 30 years. That it is a sleeping dragon. It doesn't need to eat. It doesn't need to drink. It just stands there, in the dark, full of toxic fire, waiting for the lid to open. This creates a unique hazard for the maintenance crews. The fuel is highly toxic. A leak in the silo would kill everyone instantly. The archive contains reports of silo maintenance. Men in heavy rubber suits, descending into the pit to check the pressure gauges on a rocket that has been sitting there since 1985. They are walking next to a bomb that isn't a bomb, checking the batteries of the end of the world. There is a specific historical event in the file, the 1984 test. For a long time, Western intelligence agencies suspected the command rocket existed, but they weren't sure. Was it a myth, a bluff? In November 1984, the Soviet Union conducted a live fire test of the system perimeter. They launched a command rocket from a test site near Moscow. It flew across the entire country, heading toward the Kura test range in the far east. As it flew, it transmitted the launch code. On the ground, at a silo in Kazakhstan, a designated launcher missile was sitting in standby mode. It had no warhead, but it was live. When the command rocket passed overhead, the launcher missile received the signal, without any human in the control bunker turning a key. The launcher missile ignited and flew. It worked. The test proved that the Soviet Union could fight a nuclear war without a single living soldier. Imagine the generals watching the telemetry screens that day, seeing the green line of the command rocket trigger the red lines of the launchers. It must have been a moment of triumph, and a moment of absolute horror. They had successfully made themselves obsolete. That the archive chill narrative often focuses on ghosts. The 15A11 is a technological ghost. Most weapons are designed to be used by the victor. You use a tank to take territory. You use a gun to win a battle. But the command rocket is a weapon for the loser. It is designed to be used only when you have already lost. It is the weapon of spite. It ensures that if I die, you die too. This philosophy is baked into the hardware. The flight path of the 15A11 is not toward the enemy. It is toward its own country. It flies over Mother Russia. It is a guardian angel that flies over the graveyard to wake up the dead. Let's look at the receiver antennas. If you were an urban explorer in Russia today, hiking through the forests near an abandoned missile base, you might see them. They look like strange, geometric shapes poking out of the ground. Small cones, odd grids. These are the ears of the silo. They are hardened against blast pressure. They are designed to listen to only one thing, the sky dot. They are constantly scanning the zenither point directly overhead, waiting for the 15A11 to pass by. In the modern era, the file suggests that the command rockets are still active. The UR-100N airframe is old, but reliable. The Russian military has likely upgraded the electronics. Perhaps the vacuum tubes have been replaced with radiation-hardened solid-state drives. Perhaps the encryption is stronger, but the physics remains the same. The command rocket is still sitting in its tube. Where are they? The exact locations are classified, of course, but intelligence analysts look for anomalies in satellite photos. Silos that are slightly different from the others. Silos with extra communication arrays nearby. Likely candidates are in the Saratov region, or the Ivanovo region. Places deep in the interior, protected by layers of air defense. These rockets are the crown jewels of the dead hand. If the enemy wants to disable the system, they have to kill the command rockets first. But that is difficult, because to kill them, you have to know which silo holds a nuke, and which silo holds the radio. It is a shell game, a deadly version of three-card Monty, played with million-pound explosives. The psychological impact of the command rocket on the audience is the realization of the unstoppable signal. We live in a world where we think we can stop things. We can block a phone number. We can turn off the Wi-Fi. We can jam a signal. But you cannot stop the 15A11. Once it launches, it is a broadcast tower moving at Mach 10. You cannot shoot it down easily. It is flying too high and too fast. You cannot jam it. It is beaming directly down from space with megawatts of power. It is inevitable. It represents the final word in an argument between nations. This rocket is the last sentence that will ever be spoken. There is a poetic sadness to the command rocket. It is a machine that will never be used as long as there is hope. It only flies when hope is gone. If you ever look up at the night sky and see a streak of light moving faster than a satellite, pray that it is just a shooting star, because if it is the 15A11, if it is the command rocket, it means there is no one left to look at the sky with you. The file contains a transcript of the signal. Payload. It is not a voice speaking Russian. It is a digital burst, a screech of data. To the human ear, it sounds like a dial-up modem, screaming in agony. Skree on nnk-ch-ch-ch.ch. That sound carries the codes for thousands of warheads. It is the most dense information packet in existence. A few seconds of sound that translates to the erasure of history. We must also consider the check-in protocol. Does the command rocket know it has succeeded? No. It has no eyes. It sends the signal, and then it crashes. It runs out of fuel and falls into the ocean, or burns up in the atmosphere. It is a suicide mission. It wakes the others, and then it dies. The silence of the archive feels deeper after reading about the 15A11. We look at the blueprints, the sleek lines of the fuselage, the complex wiring of the radio bay. It is a beautiful piece of engineering. It is a masterpiece of aerospace design, and it is the most evil object ever constructed. We slide the canister back into the shelf. The metal scrapes against metal, a harsh sound in the quiet room. We lock the cabinet. The command rocket is asleep. The fuel is in the tank. The ampules are sealed. The radio is cold, but the system is shifting. The file we just closed was about the hardware, but hardware needs a home. In the next file, we will explore the migration. We will look at why the heart of the system moved from the swamps of Poverovo to the deep bunkers of the Leningrad district. We will look at the logistics of moving a ghost. Why did they move it? What did they find in the old location that made them leave? The archive is closing for the night. The blue lights dimmed. The hum of the server fades to a whisper. Sleep well. The rockets are in their silos, and the sky is empty. Ghosts do not usually move. In folklore, a ghost is bound to the place of its death, a haunted house, a graveyard, a specific room. But in the world of clandestine radio, ghosts are mobile. For nearly 30 years, the buzzer was synonymous with a specific patch of swamp 40 kilometers northwest of Moscow. The coordinates 6018 feet N were burned into the minds of intelligence analysts and amateur radio enthusiasts alike. That was where the heart beat. That was where the monster lived. But in the autumn of 2010, something unprecedented happened. The ghost packed its bags. The signal that had been the stable anchor of the Cold War suddenly became volatile. It broke down, it screamed, and then it vanished from the airwaves, only to reappear hundreds of miles away, in a new body, with a colder, sharper voice. The migration of station UVB-76 is one of the few times the dead hand showed us its back. It showed us that it was running. The file we are opening tonight is designated the 2010 Exodus. It documents the chaotic, mysterious, and terrifying relocation of the world's most dangerous radio station. It explores why a superpower would abandon a fortified bunker to rot in the woods, and where they took the machine that controls the end of the world. The file was stamped, never open, yet we begin tonight, ... We retreat into the archive. The server room is quieter tonight. The heavy files on the Poverovo bunker are being moved to the historical section. We are clearing the desk for a new map. A map of the Leningrad military district. The air in the archive smells of dust and transition. We are tracking a fugitive signal. To understand the migration, we must first look at the decade. By the late 2000s, the famous bunker at Poverovo, the home of the buzzer since the 1980s, was dying. It was not dying from enemy action. It was dying from neglect. The Soviet Union had collapsed 20 years prior, and the funding for Unit 4625 had evaporated. Reports from the time suggest a grim reality for the soldiers stationed there. The roof of the command center leaked. During the heavy Russian rains, water would drip onto the control consoles. The soldiers had to use plastic tarps to cover the vacuum tube amplifiers that were keeping the Western world safe from nuclear war. Imagine the irony. The dead hand system, capable of launching 1,000 missiles, was being protected from the rain by a cheap piece of plastic. The infrastructure was rotting. The copper grounding wires, essential for the massive antenna grid, were corroding in the acidic swamp soil. The diesel generators were old, prone to failure, chugging black smoke into the pristine birch forest. The buzzer was sounding sick. If you listen to the audio archives from 2009 and early 2010, you can hear the struggle. The tone was deeper, rougher. The background hum was louder. It sounded like a machine that was wheezing. The live microphone anomalies we discussed in previous files became more frequent. We heard more shouting. We heard more clanking. It sounded like the operators were fighting a losing battle against the equipment. Then came the intruders. As the security perimeter degraded, the ghost in the swamp began to attract visitors. Urban explorers, brave or foolish, began to get closer to the fence. They reported that the guard dogs were gone. The searchlights were burnt out. The Russian military faced a crisis. Their most secret, most vital signal was broadcasting from a ruin that teenagers could break into. They had to move, but you cannot simply unplug a doomsday device and put it in a truck. The migration of a strategic transmitter is a logistical nightmare. You need a new site. You need massive power. You need antennas that are miles long, and you need to do it all without interrupting the signal for more than a few seconds, because if the signal stops, the system perimeter wakes up. The transition began in August 2010. This is known in the community as the month of storms. The signal went crazy. It stopped buzzing and started transmitting a flat line. Then it switched to a high-pitched squeal. Then, silence. Then, a series of frantic voice messages. UVB-76. UVB-76. 93-882. Naimina. These were not standard drill codes. These were test signals. They were calibrating the new transmitter. Imagine the scene. Two bunkers, separated by 400 miles. In Poverovo, the old guard is stripping the room. They are pulling hard drives. They are burning codebooks in the courtyard. They are flipping switches that haven't been touched in 30 years. shutting down the massive capacitors. In the new location believed to be near the village of Kara Massive, north of St. Petersburg, a new crew is standing by. They are in a modern facility. The air is clean. The equipment is solid state, digital, sleek. They are waiting for the HANDOFF. It is like passing a baton in a relay race. But the baton is a live grenade. The actual moment of migration is hard to pinpoint, but spectral analysis shows a shift in the harmonic fingerprint. One day, the signal was dirty, analog, full of the 50 Hz hum of the old power grid. The next day, the signal was clean, sharp, digital. The ghost had jumped bodies, but what did they leave behind? This is where the story becomes a ghost story in the literal sense. When the military trucks finally drove away from Poverovo for the last time, they left the gates open. They didn't even lock the door to the bunker. Why? Perhaps they were in a rush. Perhaps they wanted to create a honeypot, a trap for spies. Or perhaps they simply didn't care anymore. The magic was gone. The soul of the machine had moved to St. Petersburg. The Poverovo bunker was just a concrete shell. Within weeks, the first explorers entered the abandoned site. The footage they captured is haunting. They walked through the open gates. They walked past the rusted stop, shoot to kill signs. They walked into the green building. It was a time capsule of the apocalypse. They found the logbooks we mentioned in earlier files. Generator fuel low, temperature critical. They found gas masks littering the floor like dead insects. They found the cage, the metal mesh room where the live microphone had sat. The microphone was gone, but the stand was still there. One explorer described the sensation of standing in that room. It felt warm, he wrote. Even though the heating was off and it was freezing outside, the room felt electrically charged. The walls were vibrating with the memory of the sound. But the most disturbing discovery was in the basement. We touched on the flooded sublevels before, but the migration file reveals why they flooded it. It wasn't rain. It was sabotage. Before leaving, the Russian engineers likely opened the Secocks or broke the water pipes. They flooded the lower levels intentionally. Why? To hide what was down there. To this day, no one has reached the bottom of the Poverovo bunker. The water is dark, oily, and freezing. Divers have attempted it, but the tunnels are blocked by debris. What is the dead hand hiding in the basement of its old house? Some theories suggest it is the connection to the metro to subway line. Others suggest it is a mass grave of failed equipment, radioactive isotopes used in the old batteries, dumped into the water to prevent radiation leaks on the surface. Whatever it is, the military made sure that when they migrated, they drowned the past. The signal did not just move, it evolved. When the buzzer reappeared in late 2010, it was broadcasting from a new location. Triangulation by amateur radio operators, the fox hunters pinpointed the source to the Leningrad military district, specifically, a marshland area near the Estonian border. The new coordinates, 6,018 feet N, a strange coincidence, or a deliberate alignment. But further west. This move was strategic. Poverovo was near Moscow. It was central. But the new site is near the border of NATO. By moving the transmitter to the St. Petersburg region, the Russian military was placing the dead hand voice closer to Europe. It was a subtle threat. We are here. We are loud. And we are watching you. The new signal is different. The archive chill listeners who used the buzzer for sleep noticed the change immediately. The old buzz was warm, fuzzy, hypnotic. The new buzz is colder. It has a harsher metallic edge. Spectral analysis confirms this. The new transmitter is more powerful, but it lacks the organic chaos of the old vacuum tubes. It is a sterile sound. It sounds like a computer pretending to be a buzzer. This suggests that the live mic setup may have been replaced, or at least modified. Is there still a microphone in a room, or is it now a direct feed? Interestingly, the live mic anomalies did not stop after the migration. We still hear voices. We still hear phones ringing. This confirms that, even in the new, modern bunker, the fundamental design remains: a human being, in a room, with an open line. Why? Why keep such an archaic system in a modern facility? The answer lies in the philosophy of the human breaker. If the signal were purely digital, a hacker could loop it. A hacker could record 10 hours of the buzz, hack the frequency, and play it back. The dead hand computer would hear the loop and think everything is fine, even if the Kremlin had been destroyed. But by using a live microphone, by introducing the random noise of a room, the air pressure, the slight hum, the coughing soldier, you create a signal that is impossible to fake. You cannot fake entropy. You cannot fake the chaos of the real world. The live mic is an encryption key. The randomness proves it is real. So, Even in the sleek concrete fortress of the new site, there is likely a small, soundproofed room where a microphone sits on a table, listening to a speaker buzzing away. The migration also brought a change in the call sign. For decades, the voice messages began with UVB 76. After the 2010 move, the voice changed. It started saying MDZHB, Mikhail, Dmitry, Genya, Boris, and more recently, ZHUOZ, Genya, Uliana, Olga, Zina. The name of the ghost changed. This suggests a reorganization of the military districts. The dead hand was being integrated into a new command structure. It was no longer a standalone relic. It was being upgraded for the wars of the 21st century. The file on the migration includes reports from the local villagers near the new site. The village of Karo Massive is quiet, but residents report that since 2010, their radios behave strangely. Car radios pick up the buzz when they drive past certain forest roads. Television reception flickers in time with the pulse. They are living in the shadow of the transmitter. Imagine living next door to the doomsday device. You are cooking dinner, and your radio buzzes. It is a constant reminder that the system is armed. There is also the triangle theory. After the migration, analysts noticed that the signal became part of a larger network. It wasn't just 4,625 kHz anymore. There were sister signals, the pip on 3,756 kHz, the squeaky wheel on 3,828 kHz. These stations seem to coordinate. When one stops, the other speeds up. When one sends a message, the others go silent. The migration wasn't just a move, it was a networking event. The dead hand grew more fingers. This makes the system harder to kill. If you destroy the St. Petersburg transmitter, the pip in Rostov takes over. If you destroy Rostov, the squeaky wheel takes over. It is a hydra. The most haunting aspect of the migration is not the new location, but the psychological residue of the old one. In the years following 2010, Poverovo became a pilgrimage site for dark tourism. People wanted to see the corpse of the station, but the archive notes a strange phenomenon. Many who visited the abandoned site reported feeling ill, headaches, nausea, a sense of overwhelming dread. Was it radiation? The Geiger counters showed normal levels. Was it toxic mold? Possible. Or was it Some acoustic experts believe that 40 years of broadcasting a hyper-low-frequency signal imprinted something on the location. The Earth itself might still be vibrating at a subaudible frequency. The phantom buzz. Visitors claim that if you stand in the center of the old antenna field and close your eyes, you can still hear it. A faint, rhythmic throbbing in the inner ear. Buzz, buzz, buzz. It is likely psychosomatic, a trick of the mind, but it speaks to the power of the signal. It etched itself into the landscape. The migration teaches us a valuable lesson about the archive chill. We tend to think of history as something that is over. We look at black and white photos of the Cold War and think, that was back then. But the migration proves that the Cold War never ended. It just moved. It packed up its equipment, drove up the highway, and set up shop in a new building with better Wi-Fi. The dead hand is not a relic. It is a modern, evolving, active participant in our world. The engineers who managed the move in 2010 are likely still working there. They are older now. They have trained a new generation. Young men and women who were born after the Soviet Union fell are now sitting at the console, guarding a system built by their grandfathers. The torch has been passed. The signal has migrated not just across the map, but across time. As we update the file in our archive, we change the location pin. We drag it from the swamp near Moscow to the forests of St. Petersburg, but we do not close the file. The migration was successful. The patient survived the surgery. The heartbeat is strong. And tonight, as you sleep, the signal is traveling out from its new home. It is bouncing off the ionosphere. It is passing through the roof of your house. It is the same sound that your parents heard during the Cuban Missile Crisis. It is the same sound that will likely be broadcasting long after we are gone. The ghost moved, but it is still haunting us. We place the migration folder back on the shelf. The ink is still fresh on the new coordinates. The server lights blink in the dark. The archive is closing. The transition is complete. Sleep well. The system is upgraded, and the watch continues. There is a fundamental irony to the concept of an automated doomsday. We imagine the dead hand as a purely digital entity, ghost in the machine that exists in the ether of radio waves and code. We imagine it as a spirit that needs nothing to survive. But the classified logistics files tell a different story. They reveal a truth that is grimy, heavy, and loud. The machine is not a ghost. It is a beast. And like any beast, it must be fed. For 40 years, the signal that holds the world hostage has been powered by something incredibly mundane: diesel fuel. The hidden truth of the apocalypse is that it requires a supply chain. It requires trucks driving through the snow in the middle of the night. It requires men with grease on their hands unlocking heavy steel gates. It requires a schedule. If the delivery is late, the end of the world runs out of battery. File we are opening tonight is stamped logistics and power supply. It removes the mystique of the high-tech computer and forces us to look at the engines breathing in the basement. It asks the terrifying question: who are the people filling the tank of the machine that is designed to kill them? The file was stamped never open, yet we begin tonight. We descend. We leave the antenna field and the radio room behind. We go down the narrow metal spiral staircase that leads to the air gets warmer here. It smells of unburnt hydrocarbons, oil, and hot metal. The silence of the archive is replaced by a vibration that you feel in your teeth before you hear it with your ears. We are entering the heart of the bunker. We are entering the generator room. To understand the survival of the dead hand, we must understand the grid independence protocol. The engineers who built the perimeter system in the 1980s were paranoid. They knew that in the first few seconds of a nuclear war, the national power grid would vanish. Power plants would be targeted. Transmission lines would melt. The lights in Moscow, St. Petersburg, and Vladivostok would go out instantly. If the dead hand was plugged into the wall, it would die with the rest of the country, so they designed it to be an island. Every command node, every radio transmitter, every sensor bunker was built with massive, redundant power generation capabilities. They didn't just put in a backup battery, they built underground power plants. The file describes the standard setup for a Class A survival bunker. Deep beneath the earth, usually on the 3rd or 4th sublevel, sit the engines. These are not small generators, they are ship engines. Massive, 12-cylinder diesel monsters taken from naval destroyers or locomotives. They are bolted to the concrete floor on giant springs to dampen the vibration, and they are always running, or rather, they are always ready to run. The system uses a flywheel energy storage mechanism. A massive steel wheel spins constantly, maintaining kinetic energy. If the main power line from the surface is cut by a storm or a bomb, the flywheel uses its momentum to crank the diesel engine instantly. There is no flicker, there is no gap. The lights don't even blink. The machine transitions from the grid to the generator in less than a millisecond, but engines need fuel. This brings us to the tank farm. Buried alongside the bunker are massive reservoirs of diesel fuel. These tanks hold thousands of gallons, enough to run the station for weeks, perhaps months, in total isolation. But fuel goes bad. Diesel degrades over time. Algae grows in the tanks. Sludge forms at the bottom. So, the fuel must be cycled. It must be polished, and eventually, it must be replaced. This is where the human element enters the story. Imagine the job of the fuel logistics officer. For the dead hand, you are a civilian contractor, or perhaps a low-ranking logistics soldier. You drive a tanker truck. Your manifest says you are delivering to Unit 4625. You drive out of St. Petersburg, onto the highway, then onto a smaller road, and finally onto a dirt track that winds through the dense pine forest. It is winter, the snow is deep, the forest is silent. You arrive at a gate that doesn't appear on any GPS. A soldier checks your ID. He doesn't smile. He opens the gate. You drive your truck into the courtyard of a nondescript building. You hook up the heavy hoses to the intake valves jutting out of the ground, and you pump thousands of gallons of explosive fuel into the earth. You are feeding the beast. Do you know what the machine does? Do you know that the fuel you are delivering will power the signal that launches the missiles? Or is it just another delivery, just another paycheck? The archive chill comes from the banality of this evil. The apocalypse isn't maintained by fanatics in robes. It is maintained by guys driving trucks, checking clipboards, and drinking coffee from thermoses while the pump runs. The file also details the ventilation problem. Diesel engines breathe air. They consume massive amounts of oxygen and expel deadly carbon monoxide. If you bury a diesel engine underground, you have to give it lungs. The landscape around the dead hand bunkers is dotted with snorkel systems. These are concrete chimneys hidden in the bushes. They suck in fresh air from the forest and push the exhaust out. During the winter, if you look at the forest floor near the bunker with a thermal camera, you can see the heat plumes, pillars of hot exhaust rising from the ground. These plumes are dangerous. They are a signature. An enemy satellite looking down with infrared sensors can see the heat. They can see that the bunker is breathing. So, the engineers built cooling chambers. Before the exhaust is released, It is passed through a labyrinth of cold water pipes to lower its temperature. They try to hide the breath of the machine, but the sound is harder to hide. Locals near the transmission sites often report a low-frequency thrumming at night. It isn't loud enough to wake you up, but you can feel it. It rattles the window panes slightly. It makes the water in a glass tremble. This is the sound of the generator testing itself. Every week, the automated systems fire up the engines for a load test. They run them at full power for an hour to burn off carbon deposits and ensure they are ready for the end of the world. For that hour, the earth vibrates. The bunker shakes. The operators downstairs put on ear protection. It is a rehearsal. The machine is practicing for the day the power never comes back on. But what happens if the humans stop coming? This is the scenario 0 discussed in the file. Let's assume the war happens. The cities are gone. The supply chain is broken. There are no more trucks coming from St. Petersburg. The gate is locked, and no one is there to open it. The machine is now running on a countdown. It has the fuel in the tanks. Maybe it has enough for 30 days. For 30 days, the generator will roar in the darkness. The lights in the empty bunker will stay on. The cooling fans will spin. The buzzer will keep broadcasting. I am here, but the fuel gauge is dropping. Day 10, day 15, day 29. The low fuel alarm triggers. It flashes red on a console that no one is looking at. The logic of the dead hand has to make a choice. Does it assume that the lack of fuel is an attack? Does it interpret the dying of the generator as the dying of the state? Some analysts believe the system is programmed to launch on power loss. If the voltage drops below a certain level, the computer assumes the bunker has been breached or destroyed. It uses the last few drops of diesel to send the fire command. This means that the peace of the world depends on the fuel gauge not hitting empty. It depends on the truck driver not getting a flat tire. It depends on the procurement officer not forgetting to sign the order form. We are safe only as long as the logistics hold. The file also mentions the battery room, even below the generators. There is another layer of backup, the uninterruptible power supply room. This room is filled with rows of lead-acid batteries, or more recently, lithium-ion banks. It looks like the server room of a data center, but heavier. Batteries are chemical. They leak. They corrode. Maintenance logs from the Povorovo era show that the soldiers hated the battery room. It smelled of sulfur. The air burned your eyes. They had to go in there with rubber gloves and check the terminals. They were tending to the chemical heart of the system. There is a story in the archive, unverified but persistent, of a soldier who fell asleep in the battery room in 1998. The ventilation failed. He didn't wake up. The machine claimed a life just to keep its voltage stable. As we look at the diagrams of the fuel lines and the exhaust vents, we realize the physical vulnerability of the dead hand. You don't need a nuclear missile to kill it. You just need to block the air intake, or cut the fuel line. But the system knows this. The bunker beneath is not just a basement, it is a fortress. The fuel tanks are encased in armor. The air intakes have blast valves that snap shut in milliseconds if they detect a pressure wave. If the valves close, the bunker seals itself. It switches to internal oxygen tanks. It becomes a submarine buried in the dirt. The people inside are trapped. They are sealed in with the machine. This is the dark pact of the operator. You are safe from the nuclear blast, yes, but you are locked in a concrete box with a roaring diesel engine and a computer that wants to launch missiles. You are the final spare part. The archive chill asks us to visualize the generator room right now, at this very moment. While you are lying in bed, the piston is moving, up and down, up and down. The oil is flowing. The flywheel is spinning. It is a heartbeat that is much louder and much scarier than the radio buzz. The radio buzz is just the voice. The generator is the muscle. We often fear AI taking over the world, but we forget that AI needs electricity. The dead hand is not a god. It is a vampire. It needs the blood of the earth to survive, and it needs us to bring it. We are the servants who carry the food to the monster's cage. Unlock the door, slide the plate in, and lock it again. We do this every week, every month, for 40 years. Why do we do it? Because we are afraid of what happens if the monster gets hungry. We close the file on the logistics. We can almost smell the diesel fumes on the paper. We can feel the heat of the engine radiating from the folder. The supply chain is active. The next delivery is scheduled. The truck is already loaded. The driver is finishing his cigarette, climbing into the cab, and turning the key. He is driving into the night to save the world, 1 gallon at a time. We slide the heavy drawer shut. The vibration in the floor seems to stop, but we know it's just the soundproofing of the archive. Down below, deep in the crust of the earth, The engine never stops. On the next file, we will step out of the noisy generator room and into the philosophy of the end. We will look at the mutual destruction doctrine. We will ask, why did we build this? What is the logic of a weapon that kills the user?